Welcome back to Teaching the Unteachables, where we dive into teaching and learning methodologies for professionals like you. This episode brought to you by Joey Henderson, otherwise known as JoeJoe the HVAC Man. Learn more at JoeJoeHVAC.com. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC podcast. So today we're hanging out with Joey Henderson, otherwise known as JoeJoe the HVAC Man. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Hey, Joey, what happens if the next refrigerant generation we see is milk?
Well, first I want it to be nice and cold whenever I get some out of it.
I do too.
Other than that, we'll use it just like we do any other refrigerant.
Right.
Don't worry. Yep.
Just be a refrigerant.
It's just a refrigerant. That's all it is.
We always get caught up on, oh man, is this new refrigerant got high pressure? Oh man, is this refrigerant going to be flammable? Oh man, is it, what does it really come down to?
That's great question, and it's always been the same. We got a certain saturation temperature in the condenser and a certain saturation in the evaporator, and that's all we're worried about. No matter what flavor of ice cream is inside that unit.
Ain't that a great way to think about it? And I think we forget about that. Yeah, we get caught up on what is going to be different, and we don't really think about, what's going to be the same.
Right. There's, like any other thing, there are variables, and but we got to focus on the constant, and there are constants. And to keep it simple, because I'm a simple man, is the saturated condenser temperature is always these days, used to be 30 degrees above ambient. And let me just tell you this real quick. When I was in the field and I heard that 30 over ambient, and we're both back from the 8 SEER days, and 10 SEER was wow, and 12 SEER was unheard of. All right, but those condensers, were small and tiny, and we were told 30 degrees above ambient. Well, in my mind, I got turned around because I was so used to reading air coming in and air going out across an evaporator. Well, I thought I was supposed to measure the air coming into the condenser and the air coming out the top of the condenser.
Like a split.
Yeah, and it never worked. So I threw it in the garbage and never went back. When I finally got educated and found out, it's outside air temperature versus the saturation temperature in the condenser. Mm-hmm. Well, it became simpler. These days, our average unit out there, your 14 to 16 SEER, is going to run between 15 and 20 degrees above ambient. So it's very simple. If it's 90 degrees outside, you add 20, you're looking for 110 degree condensing temperature. And then you convert that to pressure. And it don't matter what refrigerant's in there. Now you know what pressure you ought to be looking at. But first, just make sure you got the right saturation, and it works every time.
Yeah. And so it's as simple as, all right, we always preach airflow overcharge. Right. Mm-hmm. So if we have verified that the outdoor unit is getting proper airflow and the indoor unit is getting proper airflow, now we can simply look at it from a temperature perspective.
That's right. And you're right. This does work on the fact that coils are clean, filters are clean, airflow is correct. Exactly.
Yeah. So if we think about that, and we look at refrigerant, because we're going through a refrigerant change, and there's going to be a lot of people very concerned with this refrigerant change going, oh man, I keep hearing it's going to be mildly flammable. We get into A3s, they're going to be highly flammable. All my pressures, my gauges aren't going to look the same. I won't know what to do. And it always comes back to, yeah, you do. You're overcomplicating things.
That's right. Right.
An evaporator temperature on an air conditioning system has never really changed when we went through these refrigerant changes.
It never has. So you and I got in the field similar time frame, mm-hmm. And so when I jumped in out of the Navy and stepped into the residential commercial world, all of a sudden R12 was being shot down and R22 was being shot down, and we had to go to new refrigerants. And it was like, oh my gosh, when I got the job with Carrier and we were really, really pushing 410A training, I had guys think the unit was going to blow up. They thought, it was crazy, but it's every unit's designed for whatever pressure they want to put in them.
Yeah.
But the temperature never changed. The saturation temperature is always centered around the application. So if it's air conditioning, the evaporator coil has adjusted a little bit. We were running closer to a 35 degree evaporator coil back in the old days. And then we've kind of raised it, and on average we're running 40, 42. I've seen some as high as 45, but on average, again, we're just keeping it simple.
Yep.
On average, about a 40-degree evaporator suction. We look at about a 35-degree split between return air and saturation temperature in the coil. That way we get the latent and the sensible removal with the proper airflow, right?
Right.
And then you get to these condensers, and now since they're making them, they used to be 3 foot tall. Now they're 15 foot tall. You only got 3 options when it comes to a condenser design to get it high efficient. You're either going to expand the diameter of it so it won't fit in the backyard or through the gate to get in there, right? Or they're going to make it a tower that looks like a cooling tower outside the back of your house, or they'll double it. So you'll have the evaporator overlay. And just a side note, guys, don't forget to split that thing open and wash it in
Clean
between.
Inside. Yeah,
I've dropped a unit 100 PSI just by cracking it open, and it doesn't look that bad, but I promise you, it's like a film of plastic in between those 2 coils. Another little side note.
No.
But, get all that clean, and then what head pressure should I be looking for?
That's always the question. What should my pressures be,
right,
Joey?
What's my pressures?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at the moment. Find out what your saturation should be. Then you can convert that to the pressure for whatever refrigerant, including milk.
Exactly. Because if we think
By
about
the way, you and I got a patent coming up right on milk refrigerant.
You know what? That would be a blended refrigerant.
That would be a blended refrigerant.
If we take R718, which is H2O, and we blend it with lactose, which I don't even know. We could probably patent the PT chart for lactose, and then we blend the 2 of those, and we got milk, and we're going to call that. That's not an MO refrigerant. That's an MOO refrigerant.
There we go. Moo juice.
Moo-too.
There we go. Moo-too. I like it. There we go.
So if we think about that, right? If we had one chemical in it alone, that's a single constituent refrigerant. If I blend a couple of them, well, now I've got 2 refrigerants that are taking up the same space, and they might boil off a little bit different.
Right.
And we are going to see that going into our new generations of refrigerants for air conditioning. If we think about like R22 was a single constituent refrigerant. It had R22, right? When we went to R410A, we were actually working with a blended refrigerant, but we never talked about it enough. R410A is a blend, a 50-50 blend of R32 and R125, right? We weren't ready for the mildly flammable refrigerant R32, so we threw some flame deterrent called 125 in there, and we end up with 410A.
That's right.
So the reason we had to flip the jug upside down when we were charging it, because we had to charge it with the liquid, because it had that glide, that little bitty potential for boiling off. Very small. Now, when we move into R32, well, we are moving into R32 and 454. They're already hitting the streets.
Yep.
R32 is a single constituent refrigerant. Remember, it was half of R410A. So on my PT chart, boom, whatever my pressure is, my temperature should be this.
Right.
Now, with 454B, we're actually going to have some glide. And so I think it's great to talk about blended refrigerants and just really to understand that what that means is in a little window, we could have one refrigerant, if we're raising the pressure, we can have one refrigerant boil off at a temperature and the other one be catching up, be not quite done, right? So there's a little window in there between when it's totally a vapor and below when it's totally a liquid. Now, is it going to matter with our digital gauges?
Not much.
Not really. It's going to calculate that difference.
Yeah, they're going to calculate it for us.
Yeah.
I like the way you put it, because dew and bubble just every time I heard somebody explain it, I've at some point my brain checked out because it just got complicated, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Last thing I hate is something complicated. Again, I'm a simple man, so I want to keep it simple. And like you said, on the dew and the bubble, you got, at the dew, we got a dew point temperature, we're looking at 100 degrees saturation, and at 315 psig, we're right at the cusp. And anything above that, we're going to be a total gas. That would be superheated gas.
Yep.
Right. And then on the bubble, which would be the lower end of the pressure range,
go through that little window of glide.
right, we're gliding. We're dropping down. Kind of think of the movie The Abyss. We're dropping down.
That's right.
So finally, when we hit the
Hit the
layer where we're
bottom.
going down to where the mega shark lives,
Yep.
we've now hit true liquid, right?
Yes.
But back in the day, you and I, we all carried in our little pocket these little PT charts,
Mm-hmm.
and then they made them out with these dew and bubble, and we all lost our minds, But now with the digital gauges that have it all built in for us, they're not going to. I haven't seen yet where they show bubble and dew. They're pretty much going to take an average between that window.
And that's exactly what they're going to do.
And you can figure out your subcool and your superheat the same way you always have. Of course, these days they're doing it for you.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's right.
So you got to trust it. The only thing you're gonna, the only left is whether or not your sensors are accurate or not. So, but I don't really like to get too caught up in the weeds with doing bubble. It is what it is. It's a short window, so it's definitely bigger compared to, like you said, 410A by all means. But in the end, we're still going to go for an average target condensing temperature and a target evaporator.
That's it.
And then we can troubleshoot from there. Is my head pressure running too high? Well, darn, I don't know. These new refrigerants, maybe it's 600. I don't know. Well, no, it's not. 454B, R32 are close to 410A. Not perfect, but it's not being that crazy. When you and I came through and they went from R12, well, I wasn't around when we went from R12 to R22 in ACs. All right. I was when we went from R12 to 134A in refrigeration, but we went from 22 to 410A. That was a substantial increase.
Absolutely.
And we also changed oils. We had a major transformation back in the 90s, early 90s.
I agree.
Here, we've already got POE oil. We've all got that stuck in our heads.
Yep.
And now, really, the 454B and R32 is just not that big of a change on operation.
We're going to see 32 go up a few, and we're going to see 454 go down a few.
That's right. And a few is the right way to say it.
Yeah, it's literally just a few. I mean, if you're not used to reading temperatures and pressures anyhow, you're going to put them gauges on and it's going to look almost identical to what you have in the past.
It really is. And, you and I, we got this little chart up here in front of us, and you look at 100-degree condensing temperature for 410A, and and you've even got that little bit of a glide in there, but let's just say it's 333, and that was so average. When I started doing training for 410A with Carrier, they were guesstimating, because we hadn't had a unit out there yet. I was certified 410A 2 years before one even hit the streets.
Right.
And they were telling us 400 head pressure, 400 head pressure. Oh, I never saw 400 head pressure in my life on 410A. It was 335,
Absolutely.
340. And guess what that is? 100 to 105 condensing. And that is design, no matter what refrigerant it is. And then you go over here to 454B, and sure enough, I mean, you look at the average between 454B, and it's between 305 and 315. So we're kind of hitting in the middle there. We're a little bit lower than 410A, and R32 is going to be almost the same. It's like 340. So
a little higher.
No freaking out. It's okay,
Absolutely.
Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep it simple, and you'll be all right. But now that if it's 95 outside, let's say it's 105 outside, add 20 to that, and that's where your saturation temperature ought to be, and then convert that to whatever refrigerant pressure you're working on.
Absolutely. If I was working with something like CO2, people go, oh, I don't know what it would be like to work on CO2. What kind of head pressure am I going to have? Well, 100 degrees, 1363. It's a lot of pressure. That's the kind of pressures we need to educate on. If we're going to talk about high pressures, 22 to 410 is not high pressure change.
That's right. We'll make the coils out of titanium.
Yeah, 410 to CO2. Now we're talking. What about water?
That's right.
Right? We're going to make our new, Moo 22. Moo 22. Very good. We're actually going to be in vacuum. At 100 degrees, we're going to be at 28 inches. Right? So water is absolutely a refrigerant. Can I have the exact same evaporator temperature and condensing temperature and just use water? Absolutely.
Yep.
So I could run an air conditioning system on water or milk. It's just going to be in vacuum on both sides.
That's right. That's right. Everybody got to remember this podcast, because down the way when you guys are buying milk out of the grocery store for your
Remember,
refrigerant. You'll
that's
remember
right.
who did it.
Remember them Moo 22 guys?
That's right. But I mean, to just assure our audience, it's nothing to worry about. It really isn't. These new refrigerants, as far as how they're going to operate in the system, yeah, we're going to have some extra sensors on there for leaks and, the refrigerant refrigerant sensors out there, but they're slightly flammable. They broke the barrier barely. Barely. I mean, Ty just did a great little video, put a match right up to it, and nothing happened. You've done the videos to show it, and they're not gonna. Now we're not talking about propane.
No,
we're not talking about 290 or 600. We're just talking about 454B and R32, and no worries.
No, absolutely. For just the sake of conversation. Because let's think about this. Like going forward, we are going to have new refrigerants periodically.
Oh, yeah, it's going to come again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So many technicians get into the mindset of I'm learning this refrigerant and it's going to be here my whole career. No, this is Joey and I's third refrigerant change. Right. It's almost a fourth when we look at where we're.
Well,
if we add commercial in there, we're talking about a fourth generation of changes. Yeah. So as we move into the next generation of changes, we are going to go to something else sometime in the next 12 years. Because remember, the HFC phase down will be done by 2036. We will be down to an 85% reduction of all HFCs, including R32 and 454B. So, so we got a shelf life of these new, quote, refrigerants. We got a shelf life of about 12 years if they make it that long. And we will be moving into another generation of refrigerants. It might be milk. My golly, we may come up with that $1 million retirement
let's keep
idea, Joey.
We'll not be alive by then, but we'll pass it on.
That's right. Someone might actually work with Moo 22 one day.
What is it? The only thing that's constant is change.
Constant.
You can't stop it.
No.
There's going to be a reason. You're right. I mean, we've already got the phase out going. We're going to have another refrigerant to even replace these two.
Absolutely.
That's a given. But back to our point,
it's all based
the
on
design saturation temperatures will not change for air conditioning, right?
Let's just assume. What if we did have propane for air conditioning? And we took it and we put it outside. Say we have like an air to water pump sitting outside. Yep. We get rid of the line sets that have refrigerant in them, and we have line sets that have water mixed with brine, right? And so
that's right.
That's what we're going to end up with. If anyone doesn't know, if we go to propane, we are actually not going to have refrigerant indoors. It's all going to be outside. But we go get our gauges. What are we going to be looking for? We're going to have a self-contained unit outside. It's going to have an evaporator and a condenser. Yep. And because it's air conditioning, it's probably going to have a 40-degree design evaporator. It's going to have about a 100-degree design on condenser. And if we look at a PT chart, now we're going to go, okay, well, Joey was just telling me that I have that design split, right? And so I look at my approach and I go, okay, if I've got a 100-degree condensing temperature, and I walk over and I go, well, if I was 340 degrees on R32, and now I'm just going to go ahead and use R290, man, I'm going to drop all the way back down again to
190.
Yeah, I'm going to be in between 12 and 22.
That's right.
But temperature-wise, I could have a completely new generation of product.
That's right.
But I'm still probably going to design my evaporator and my condensing temperatures about the same as what we're doing right now.
That's right. Because in the end, remember, we're either raising the pressure or raising the temperature of the refrigerant so that we can reject the heat with hot air outside.
Yeah.
Right? Or we're going to lower the refrigerant temperature enough to absorb the heat on the inside. And that is all strictly based off of the indoor return air temperature that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
And the latent and sensible removal. And again, this is all back to proper airflow and proper clean coils, right? So all that comes into play, but, like you're saying, we might as well start looking at, the more and more we move to trying to get away from any of these refrigerants and have something like 290 where you can just let it go, get out of the way. They're going to be probably circulating, like a little chill water system through the house. Just like hydronic heating, we'll have, chill water through the house and have a little package unit sitting outside with a small amount of propane in it. And then, the nice thing is you ain't going to worry about recovery. And they're their pressures related to temperature are very, very close to 22.
Yeah. I seen our very first one. A lot of people missed it. We had our very first one at the AHR show this year. We had a 3-ton R290 air-to-water residential heat pump.
There you go.
3-ton. Ran on 2.8 pounds of R290.
There you go.
2.8 pounds. Not
can be
approved
done.
for U.S.
It
installations
can be
yet,
done.
but
That's right.
as the next generation, that's what we have to look at. So, we were worried about the pressure increase when we went from 22 to 410. We're worried about the flammability going from 410 to 32 and 454B. The next, we're going to probably worry about the flammability, not realizing that the pressures are actually going to go way down lower when we go to 290 or 600.
That's right.
But it all still is going to actually maintain those similar
same saturation
design and saturation of the evaporator.
The only thing you'll be keeping your eye on is the SEER rating of these, and and of course the lower the condenser split, the better. In other words, the lower amount that we've got to raise that pressure to get that heat rejection, the less work the compressor's got to do.
Less work.
And that's more efficient. So like I've got a 20 SEER unit, and yes, it comes up to my chin just about, and a whopping 2 ton. And yet it's 10 degrees over. So if it's 95 outside, I'm only running 105 condensing temperature.
Wow. So you bring the pressures down even a little bit.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So
all right.
It's easy.
It is easy. Simple math.
Easy and simple. And don't forget, Mewtwo will be near you.
JoeJoe, the HVAC man, I appreciate you hanging out with us today, and I look forward to some more conversations.
Love it. Thank you, Cliff.